Welcome to the Burrow-on branch. It's been a while since the last video, as I've been working on several projects, both modelling and non-modelling. One of the modelling projects is the subject of this video. In short, it's my first venture into 1/48 scale and my first narrow gauge scratch build. So let's get started. The subject is this 2-foot gauge 10-tonne ore wagon of the Zeehan and North East Dundas Tramway. The drawings were published in Narrow Gauge Down Under, issue 94. Those drawings are in 7mm scale, which is equivalent to 1 in 43.5. However, I'm using 1 in 48 scale because I have several 1 in 48 ready-to-run models. So that meant I had to convert all the dimensions by a factor of 0.906. The difference between the two scales is illustrated here with the 1 in 48 scale side doors overlaid on the 1 in 43.5 scale drawing. Let's take a closer look at these doors. Each door consists of individual lengths of 20 thou styrene glued to a piece of 20 thou styrene that forms the inside face of the door. Timber grain was scribed on each face first with a razor saw and then 240 grit sandpaper. The hinge brackets are scale styrene strip with a length of styrene rod glued across the bottom edge to represent the hinge. I made a simple drilling jig to ensure consistent placement of the NBWs on each bracket. Here are all the body components ready for assembly. The floor consists of individual lengths of 10 thou styrene glued to a 20 thou styrene base. The door latches are 20 thou brass wire thread through Kieran Ryan HO scale etched brass astragals. On the floor, thin strips of adhesive tape represent the tops of the door hinges. Now let's look at the assembled body from one end. The outer ends of the latches have circlets of 0.2mm copper wire to represent the locking pin loops. Note also the scribed surface of the ends. This side-on shot shows how the doors sit on the floor and overlap the ends. Note the etched brass door latches and their positions. Thin adhesive tape is used to represent the strengthening bracket around the centre pillars. Headstocks of 40 thou styrene have now been added to the ends of the floor. The chassis was assembled as a separate unit on a piece of 10 thou styrene. The side beams and centre spines are 60 thou styrene strip. Styrene diagonal end braces and bolster frames are now in place. All the brake gear is scratch built in styrene. I began with the brackets for the manual hand brakes. 2 pieces of 10 thou styrene were tacked together and then cut and finished as one. They were then separated and cleaned up with files. Note the pencil marks indicating the inside faces of each bracket. This ensures that the rod supported by each bracket is square to the wagon's centre line. The handbrake levers and other paired components were made in the same way. The yokes at the ends of the brake actuating rods were made by gluing styrene strip to styrene rod. The underfloor is nearly complete now. The brake gear, cylinders, bolsters and KD coupler bases are all in place. This side-on view shows the arrangement of the brake gear. The handbrake lever locking brackets have also been added on each side. Also visible on this side is a truss rod using styrene. Ultimately, I replaced it with brass rod, which to my eye just looks better. I used styrene rod for the brake piping under the floor and continued it through the headstocks with a view to bending it up the end boards. Ultimately, however, I used wire for the brake piping on the end boards as it was easier to curve at the top end. It's amazing how a coat of paint can make things look so much neater. Lengths of square styrene were used for the end supports and stanchions. The brackets holding the timbers to the end boards are, again, etched brass astragals. I sprayed the body QR grey before weathering with very thin washes of water-based acrylics, beginning with timber deck tan and deck tan. I repeated these washes until I got the desired effect, allowing sufficient time for each wash to dry before applying the next. Then I applied thin washes of black, brown and dark grey along plank joins and under the floor. The final touch was to add dull rust on and around the metalwork. Dull rust suggests that ore dust has covered the rusty metal. Washes of dust, dirty black and rust were added to the bogies, wheels and underframe. The last task was to set the wagon at the correct height above the rails, ensure that all four corners were the same height, and then set the coupler height. These measurements had been checked during construction, but now was the time to set them as accurately as possible. In doing these checks, I realised how unstable narrow gauge rolling stock is from side to side. Although I didn't need to, I was prepared to add a little weight to one side of the wagon in order to make it sit level across the track. Ultimately, the wagon was 10 thou too low overall, and one end was 20 thou lower than the other. This was corrected by adding fibre washers above the bogies. After those adjustments, the couplers were found to be within tolerance. As I was building this wagon, I kept thinking that I'd need to adjust my sense of proportion, as my brain said everything should be about twice the size of HO scale, but my sight and feel didn't match that. It was only when I placed this wagon beside my recently scratch-built Noddy wagon that I realised just how small a 1/48 scale 2-foot gauge wagon really is. Here's the wagon in natural light sitting on my trestle bridge diorama. Thanks for watching. Happy modelling.